Imagine waking up in the year 2148,
Hmm.
and there are no laws,
Yeah.
no governments, no, sprawling corporate conglomerates. But the catch is, it isn't a wasteland.
Right.
It's actually a garden. So today we are doing a deep dive into a really, really beautifully specific piece of futuristic fiction to figure out how a society that is built like entirely on gentle rituals instead of rigid rules, how that actually survives.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept.
It really is. We're looking at an excerpt from a serialized story called Nanocapacti the Talker, Ivy, and specifically we're looking at chapter 10.
Which has such a great title.
It does. The title is A Day That Isn't Afraid. And our mission today for this deep dive is to sort of explore how this narrative just completely flips the entire post-apocalyptic genre on its head.
It really does. It swaps out that, that grim survivalism we're so used to seeing
Oh,
for
good,
this
yeah.
profound, almost overwhelming gentleness, which is such a phenomenal shift in perspective. Like, if we connect this to the bigger picture of speculative fiction, almost every vision of the future that we consume is driven by scarcity, right?
Ew.
And fear.
Right, it's all zombies and fighting over water.
Exactly. We expect chrome and hyper-efficiency or, a desolate desert where everyone is fighting over that single drop of water. So building a futuristic world primarily through sensory details that establish peace rather than threat is actually, it's a massive creative challenge.
Yeah.
It forces us to ask, well, what actually happens when humanity just stops fighting?
Right. And we are anchored to a very specific day in this text. It's December 23rd, 2148.
Mm.
And right off the bat, the opening imagery establishes that things are fundamentally altered.
Yeah, immediately.
We were shown this morning where the sun comes up sideways.
Which is such a wild image.
It is, but it's described in this incredibly deliberate way. It says it's not broken, just tilted, like it was curious. And I have to admit, that personification caught me entirely off guard.
Yeah, well, that framing does so much heavy lifting for the world building, Because framing a cosmic anomaly, which, maybe it's a literal shift in the planet's axis, or maybe it's just a profound metaphor for a new human perspective, but calling it curious rather than, say, scorching or apocalyptic,
Right.
it tells the audience immediately how to feel. The physical world might be radically different, but it is not an enemy to be conquered anymore.
The best way I can describe it is, you know how most future timelines in media feel like a shattered mirror?
Oh, I like that.
Like it's all sharp edges, it's reflecting a broken society. And as a reader or a viewer, you are just waiting for a character to get cut.
Yeah, the tension is always there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But looking at this world, it feels more like looking through a prism. Everything is bent and the light is refracting in these strange, unpredictable ways, like a sideways sun. But it's creating something beautiful rather than something dangerous.
I love that prism analogy. It perfectly captures how the environment has transitioned from this hostile arena into basically a collaborative space. And we see this early on when the narrative brings us to these areas that are known as the old velvet zones,
Right.
which we can infer these used to be highly manicured, restricted, probably wealthy areas.
Like gated communities or something.
Exactly. And now they are just described as gardens, but the key descriptor there is that they are not perfect, just alive.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Because we have this physical setting, the tilting sun, the overgrown, imperfect gardens. But how do people actually operate within this prism? Because this is where my mind was completely blown.
Yeah.
In this 2148 society, there are no laws.
Zero.
Zero. There are only rituals.
Which represents just a monumental evolutionary step in human organization. Think about the fundamental nature of laws, right? They are mechanisms built to manage conflict, to protect property, and to distribute scarce resources through the threat of penalty. So to operate entirely without them implies a society that has just transcended those specific anxieties altogether.
And we get to look at 3 specific rituals that seem to have replaced the legal code, and they are incredibly intimate. So number 1 is kiss your favorite person when you feel too quiet. Number 2 is share soup with strangers.
I love that one.
Me too. And number 3, which might honestly be the most poetic thing I've read in a long time, is write your dreams on paper, burn them in moonlight, and let the ash become rain.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here is that these aren't just quaint habits, they actually act as a deeply localized, decentralized infrastructure. This is a society that is governed by emotional regulation and communal care.
And I have to push back a little here,
Sure.
because I am all for moonlight and sharing soup. It sounds absolutely idyllic. But realistically, can a human society actually survive on this?
It's a fair question.
I mean, who is maintaining the power grid, right? Who is fixing the plumbing while everyone is out burning their dreams in the backyard? Doesn't this imply that humanity must have survived some sort of massive catastrophic collapse and they've just, I don't know, pared everything down to the absolute bare essentials? Like, I keep wondering how you actually keep the lights on with just rituals.
Right, and that tension you are feeling, that's exactly what makes this scenario so compelling, because this raises an important question. What actually happens decades or even centuries after the post-apocalypse?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like once the dust has entirely settled and the population has stabilized, the old mechanisms of constant productivity and economic growth and hyper-organization, they might just become obsolete. They aren't trying to build an empire here. They aren't focused on GDP.
They're just living in the ruins, but they've made the ruins cozy.
Precisely. The rituals are the infrastructure. So take the sharing of soup with strangers. That isn't just a polite gesture. That replaces the bureaucratic social safety net.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It ensures no one starves. And not through taxation and redistribution, but through an ingrained cultural habit of mutual aid. And kissing when you feel too quiet. That's a communal mechanism for managing isolation and mental health. They have basically shifted the burden of survival from the state back to the community.
So if survival is no longer this agonizing everyday goal, what kind of person actually thrives in this lawless garden?
Yeah.
And I guess that brings us to our guides in this world, our central protagonists, Ivy and Ayers.
And their introduction is so beautifully handled because it gives us a really micro view of this entirely new macro world.
Right. So we meet Ivy, who has green hair, and Ayers, and that's pronounced Iris, who has magenta hair.
Mm-hmm.
And we find them in this incredibly vivid, lazy morning scene on the roof of their home. They wake up, and there's no immediate rush, no alarm clocks blaring.
Yeah.
Ivy's hand simply finds Ayers, and they are described as lying there like two vines stretched into the sky.
Which, I mean, that botanical imagery is working on multiple levels there, seamlessly linking the characters back to those gardens we talked about that are just alive.
Right.
They are an extension of their environment. They aren't separate from it.
And during this quiet moment on the roof, Ivy murmurs, "I dreamed we were trees."
Yeah.
And Ayers responds, "We kind of are, roots in each other, leaves in the wind."
The duality in that response is striking to me. Because roots in each other speaks to this profound anchoring commitment. There is immense stability in that. But leaves in the wind suggests total freedom.
Right, just going where the breeze takes you.
Exactly, a surrender to the elements, moving wherever the day takes them. It really encapsulates the ethos of their entire society. You are deeply tethered by interpersonal love, but you are entirely unbound by external societal pressures or obligations.
And that sets up this beautiful kind of jarring contrast for the next encounter they have.
Yeah.
So they eventually go downstairs. They're making tea out of flowers that they don't even bother to know the names of, which I love.
Yeah, such a great detail.
And there's a knock at the door. It's a neighborhood kid. The visual of this child is immediately striking. They have hair like wildfire and eyes like no one had ever lied to them.
And if we can pause on that for a second.
Oh, please do.
That description of the eyes is just devastatingly profound.
It really is. I mean, what kind of environment does it take for a child to reach a talking, walking age with eyes that hold absolutely no concept of deceit?
Right.
We accept minor lies, social fiction, spin, as just a normal part of growing up. But this kid has clearly been raised in a society operating on absolute radical honesty.
It speaks to a complete absence of manipulation. In our current reality, a child is bombarded by advertising, by political rhetoric, the performative nature of social media.
All the time.
Exactly, and all of those are ubiquitous forms of lying. To have eyes like no one has ever lied to you means you exist in a reality devoid of hidden agendas.
So this unmanipulated, completely innocent kid looks up at Ivy and Ayers and asks this massive question. The kid asks, "Are you the two that made the world better?" And here's where it gets really interesting, because they give contradictory answers. Ayers simply says, "No." But Ivy says, "Yes."
And the beauty of that moment is that neither of them is actually lying.
Right. Because Ayers says no, because by any traditional metric of history, they didn't do anything. They didn't lead a military revolution. They didn't invent a miraculous clean energy sword.
No peace treaties.
Right, no global peace treaty. They aren't heroes. But Ivy says yes and clarifies by telling the kid, We just remembered what it meant to be alive.
Which is the ultimate rejection of the great man theory of
Yeah.
history. For centuries, we've been taught that progress is made by conquerors or brilliant inventors, tech billionaires.
Uh,
But this story suggests an alternative. It asks, what if saving the world simply requires enough people remembering how to be present?
In a world that clearly went through some incredibly dark, traumatic collapse where humanity forgot how to just exist, choosing to live gently and love openly is the revolution. Making the world better wasn't a sweeping logistical operation for them. It was a localized, quiet return to humanity. And in response to this, the kid just leaves them a pebble, a really pretty pebble. And it's noted in the text that this act meant something. It's not a transaction, it's not payment, it's just this pure currency of appreciation. It's like saying,
Yeah.
here is something beautiful from the dirt because you are beautiful.
It completely redefines value, which transitions perfectly into how this community interacts on a larger scale. Because we've seen Ivy and Ayers in their private sanctuary, but how does a society like this process its shared history?
Right. We see that when they head out to a place called the Hill. And apparently it used to be known as the Place of Fireflies, but now the community simply calls it the Center.
Mm.
And this isn't a government building or a traditional museum. It's an open gathering place where people bring artifacts. But the items they bring are so specific and they're so odd. People bring paintings that are made out of old data chips. They bring journals with absolutely no punctuation. And they sing homemade songs, and they're often sung badly. But they are sung, as the text says, with everything.
Discarding utility for authenticity. That is the core mechanism at work here. If you think about what a data chip represents in the context of the world that came before, which is presumably our near future, a data chip is the ultimate symbol of cold logic. It's mass information, rigid categorization, commerce.
It holds terabytes of strict binary rules.
Exactly. And how are they using them now? As shiny little squares for an art project. The data on them is entirely irrelevant now. The information age has basically been repurposed into raw aesthetics.
I was reading this part and it hit me. This is kintsugi.
Oh, yes.
You know, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with cold lacquer.
Yeah.
But they are doing societal kintsugi on a massive scale. They are taking the cold, discarded, broken remnants of a failed technological past like the data chips, and they are combining them with the messy, imperfect human condition. The journals that refuse to obey the rules of grammar and punctuation, the songs that are terribly off-key, they are taking the broken pieces of human history and gluing them back together with unpolished, raw expression. It doesn't matter if the song is sung perfectly right. It only matters that you sing it with your whole chest.
Building on your kintsugi analogy, because I think that's brilliant, what makes that art form so powerful is that the breakage and the repair become part of the history of the object.
Yeah.
You don't try to disguise the crack. You illuminate it. So this communal space, the center, is where they go to collectively illuminate their cracks.
And that collective illumination gets incredibly raw. Because while they're at the center, Ayers stands up in the open air and reads a poem. It's incredibly short, but it hits so hard. The poem goes, I loved her before I knew how, then I loved her after. Now I just love Pat. And that's enough.
It strips away all of the modern conditions and anxieties and overthinking that we usually attach to relationships. That phrase, and that's enough, it distills the entire ethos of their culture into 4 words.
And what really struck me wasn't just the poem itself, but the reaction to it. Someone in the crowd starts crying. And Ivy walks over and holds them. Not Ayers, who actually read the poem, but Ivy. And it was a total stranger. Like, think about how we operate today. If you see a stranger crying in public, the standard reaction is to look away.
Yeah, to give them privacy.
Right. You give them space. You pretend you don't see it because public emotion is considered awkward or inappropriate. But here, the collective processing of emotion is entirely destigmatized.
It ties right back to the permeability of their social boundaries, like we talked about with the ritual of sharing soup with strangers. The line between my private emotional life and the community's emotional life basically barely exists. The burden of grief or overwhelming emotion isn't something you are expected to just carry alone in your house. They are literally holding each other up.
So from that profound communal experience at the center, the narrative pulls our focus all the way back into the most intimate space possible. We follow Ivy and Ayers back home for the evening, and after the vast open sky of the morning and the heavy communal processing of the afternoon, the sensory details of their evening are just incredibly grounded and cozy.
It really highlights how they navigate the micro moments of their day-to-day existence.
Yeah, they were just cooking dinner in total silence. Ivy's wearing soft socks. Ayers is wearing nothing but one of Ivy's old, oversized jackets, and they are slow dancing in the kitchen to a record they found buried in the dirt.
I love that part.
And naturally, because it was in the dirt, the record skips.
Right.
But the author makes a very specific point to tell us. That made it better.
That is auditory kintsugi right there.
Oh, yes.
Right? The skipped beat on that vinyl isn't an annoyance to them. It's the gold in the crack. It's a reminder of the physical, tactile reality of the object. It has a history. It survived the collapse. It survived being buried in the earth. And now it gets to make music again, imperfections and all.
Auditory kintsugi, I absolutely love that. And while they are swaying to this skipping record, we get what I genuinely believe is the ultimate thesis of this entire story. Ivy leans in and whispers to Ayers, "I think we're healing the whole timeline just by loving." And Ayers just nods and says, "One breath at a time."
Healing the whole timeline. It is such a massive, sweeping philosophical concept, and yet it is delivered in a whisper in a kitchen while wearing an old jacket.
If you are listening to this deep dive right now, and maybe you're sitting in traffic on your commute, or maybe you're prepping for a high-stakes meeting, or you're just exhausted by the endless notifications and the constant crushing pressure to be productive and fix everything, this idea offers such a radical alternative.
It really does.
We are so obsessed with scale. We think that to fix large-scale problems, we need massive world-changing solutions. We feel this anxiety that if we aren't organizing a movement or inventing a systemic solution or going viral for a cause, we just aren't doing enough.
Right, because we have been conditioned to view healing as a top-down logistical operation. We think it requires authority and funding and metrics.
Yes, but Ivy and Ayers are suggesting the exact opposite. They are proposing that quiet, intentional love, being truly radically present with the person in front of you and accepting the skipped beats of everyday life.
Yeah.
That is a valid, powerful form of healing the world.
Yeah.
The micro scales up to the macro. Just existing peacefully without causing harm is an active way of mending a broken timeline.
It's an incredibly empowering philosophy because it democratizes the concept of saving the world. You don't need a massive platform or $1 billion to heal the timeline. You just need to be fully alive, fully present, one breath at a time. It argues that gentleness is not a passive trait. It is an active, sustaining force.
Which brings us to the final image of the chapter, and I gotta say, it leaves us with something really heavy to chew on. Ivy and Iris kiss in the kitchen, and then the perspective of the story shifts outside their home, out into the wider community. And we are shown someone painting a word on a wall. The word is remember.
Yeah?
And then the final line tells us, and nobody erased it.
It is a brilliant, lingering conclusion, because if we synthesize everything we've explored today, we have this idyllic society that actively chooses rituals over rigid laws. They embrace the imperfect, the tilted sun, the unpunctuated journals, the skipping record.
Right.
They elevate simple human connection far above whatever technological progress defined their past. But crucially, they do not want to wipe the slate completely clean.
In our modern world, graffiti gets power washed immediately. It gets painted over because it is viewed as a violation of property laws. But in a 2148 society without property laws, a society that's built on shared emotional rituals, painting a word on a public wall isn't vandalism. It's a monument. Nobody erased it because it belonged there.
And what's truly fascinating is the choice of the word. It isn't a soft, comforting word like hope or love or peace. It is an imperative command. Remember.
So what does this all mean? And that is exactly the thought I want to leave you with today. We spent this time exploring how cozy and intimate and gentle this future world is, and how they've seemingly achieved this beautiful, quiet utopia built on shared soup and moonlight. But here is the question I want you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. If a society built purely on gentle rituals and love leaves the command remember inside, untouched on a wall as a sacred monument, is their utopia actually fueled by the collective memory of a terrible past? In other words, is true, lasting peace only possible when a society flat out refuses to forget the pain that came before it?